Since 2005, the Debe to Mon Desir Highway has been an ongoing contentious issue between the government and the highway reroute movement. Since 2005, the highway reroute movement, which represents residents in 13 communities between Debe and Mon Desir, has been attempting to persuade successive governments to reroute this highway. The movement actions have included, firstly, diplomatic actions. Scores of meetings have been held with the authorities and scores of letters have been sent to the authorities. Example, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Works, the Minister of Agriculture, NIDCO, Environmental Management Authority, and constituency MPs. Secondly, legal action. A legal action was filed against the state on August 3, 2012. The claim would be heard in the High Court before Justice James Abood beginning on the 13th of May 2013. Thirdly, the movement has engaged in numerous public actions to increase awareness of the movement's concerns and to aid their diplomatic efforts. For example, an action at the Trintoplan offices in Tacarigua in 2006, and similar actions in front of the Prime Minister's office and residence, at the EMA, at the Parvati Girls High School, at the Debe High School, and the establishment of a camp at Debe, which was destroyed by soldiers and police on June 27, 2012. It was at one of these actions that the highway reroute movement secured a meeting with the Honourable Prime Minister on March 16, 2012. At this meeting, the Prime Minister and the following MPs were present: Ministers Jack Warner, Rudal Munilal, Kevin Ramnarayan, and Chandri Sharma. At this meeting, the Prime Minister promised to put on hold and review the Debe to Mon Desir Highway. Subsequent to this meeting, the highway reroute movement wrote 4 letters to the Prime Minister, reminding her to keep her promise to review. These letters were delivered to her office and her residence by hand between 5th of June and 14th November 2012. There was no response from the Honourable Prime Minister to these letters. On November 14, 2012, tractors belonging to the Brazilian contractors OAS entered the site of the proposed Faizabad interchange and started bulldozing operations. This triggered a 21-day hunger strike by Dr. Wayne Kublal Singh, in which he called for the Prime Minister to keep her promise to review before commencing any work on the Debe to Mon Desir Highway. This led to an agreement between the government and the JCC, Phyton, and other civil society groups. It was agreed to establish an independent technical committee to review the Debe to Mon Desir Highway. This committee was led by the independent senator, Dr. James Armstrong, and comprised 19 experts in the fields of urban and regional planning, hydrology and hydraulics, social impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, economic cost-benefit analysis, land tenure and acquisition, traffic and transportation planning, law, and archaeology. The report was completed on February 3, 2013, on schedule, signed in the covering letter, and submitted to the JCC for dissemination to the relevant stakeholders. The following are the recommendations made by the Independent Highway Review Committee regarding the Debe to Mon Desir Highway. I will now read these recommendations and give a brief explanation at the end of each. Recommendation 1. The CEC, or Certificate of Environmental Clearance 1372-2006, contains an extensive list of conditions intended to address the lack of detail presented to the EMA at the time of the application. A significant amount of work still needs to be undertaken to obtain approvals before any additional site activities are carried out. It is recommended that no further work be undertaken on the highway site until all of the conditions contained in the CEC have been fulfilled, including the need for all plans specified in the environmental impact assessment to be submitted to the EMA and for approvals to be obtained from the relevant agencies. This includes the Stormwater Management Plan and the Water Management Plan, consideration of which involves stakeholder consultation and feedback via the working group which is required to be formed as part of the CEC conditions. What this means, ladies and gentlemen, is when the Ministry of Works got a certificate from the Environmental Management Authority for the Debe to Mon Desir Highway, the certificate stipulated a number of conditions, and so far the government has not complied with these conditions, so the experts have recommended that all work be stopped until the government complies with the conditions as set out in this certificate. Recommendation 2. In accordance with the Town and Country Planning Act, no further construction work should be carried out on the site until all of the conditions attached to Notice of Grant of Planning Permission T7M and T8N have been fulfilled. What this means, ladies and gentlemen, is the experts are recommending that no further work on the Debe to Mon Desir Highway be carried out until all relevant town and country approvals are obtained. So far, these have not been obtained. Recommendation 3. It is imperative that a proper social impact assessment be undertaken before a decision is made whether or not to continue with the Debe to Mon Desir segment of the highway, given the potential for severe adverse impacts on the resident population and other stakeholders within the immediate and wider area of impact, including the potential severing of extended family ties. In this regard, non-relocated residents and the agricultural stakeholders who would be affected by the loss of their lands, as well as the non-relocated business people who would be affected by the highway, also need to be drawn into the study. The social impact assessment studies should include attention to the alternate routes proposed by the highway route movement and by Ministry of Works and Transport and NIDCO. So what do the experts mean by this? The experts are saying that the adverse impacts of the Debe to Mon Desir Highway are so significant that all works on this segment of the highway should be stopped until a social impact assessment is done, which looks at the impacts on not only those who would be relocated, but those who would remain. Recommendation 4. In view of the issues relating to the dislocation of persons from their homes, it is critical that a resettlement plan showing compliance with condition 3E of the CEC, that is, quote, the applicant should pursue resident relocation and resettlement utilizing best industry practices, end of quote, should be prepared and submitted to the EMA before any decision is finalized regarding the resettlement of affected persons. What does this mean? The CEC has stated that before any resettlement negotiations are entered into, the government should have a resettlement action plan in place. The government does not have a clear resettlement action plan, and experts are recommending that this must be done before the government continues with any negotiations regarding relocation or resettlement with residents. Recommendation 5. No further engineering operations are to be undertaken on the land at Petitmoon, St. Madeleine, on which it is proposed to relocate persons residing in the path of the alignment until all necessary approvals are obtained from the relevant agencies. So what are the experts saying here? The experts are saying that all works on the lands at Petitmoon be stopped because the government has not yet received all the relevant approvals from the Town and Country Planning Division. Recommendation 6. Quantitative assessment is critical to this project in the areas of hydrology and drainage. Hence, a quantitative surface and groundwater hydrology model and study of the wetland as a hydrodynamic system should be undertaken in the public interest as part of best practice before an informed decision can be made as to whether or not this segment of the highway should proceed as proposed. So what does this mean, ladies and gentlemen? The experts are saying that no further work on the Debe to Mon Desir Highway be continued until a quantitative hydrology study is carried out, because such a study is critical to a project of this nature, especially as the government is planning to pass the highway through the Reroute Lagoon. Recommendation 7. An environmental economic study of this project must also be undertaken to inform a decision whether or not to proceed with this highway segment. This should include a cost-benefit analysis comparing the economic costs of the various alignment alternatives that were assessed to demonstrate the costs of the adverse effects compared with the projected benefits. So what is meant by this, ladies and gentlemen? The experts are saying that a cost-benefit analysis for this project has not been done, and the project must be stopped until this is done. The cost-benefit analysis should consider all the costs, especially environmental costs, on one side and the benefits on the other side, and determine the economic viability of this project if they want to continue. Recommendation 8. Off-site impacts, such as the impact of removing and transporting extraordinarily large quantities of aggregate to be sourced from areas far removed from the project area, for example, quarries in the northern range, also need to be determined and measures designed to mitigate any negative impacts. So what are the experts saying here? The aggregate for the Debe to Mon Desir Highway would be obtained from the northern range. 1.4 million tons or 171,000 truckloads of aggregate would be required for this segment alone. The experts are saying that the negative impacts of this quarrying, which would be on the northern range, need to be determined and measured. Recommendation 9. The Highway Review Committee recommends that the APDSL studies be continued. The highway route movement spokesperson on traffic should be drawn into the study as part of the community involvement in this major transportation investment program. It is further recommended that consideration be given to staging highway improvement for the southwestern peninsula to allow the phased development of the transportation system and minimize the potential for overbuilding the road network at the expense of competing land uses and to the detriment of the communities within the direct or indirect range of the alignments. What does this mean? The experts are saying that in order to prevent undue distress on communities and poor land use practices, the following should be done. The transportation system must be done in stages, and the government should avoid overbuilding or overdesign of the highway. Recommendation 10. The Highway Review Committee recommends that all relevant state agencies together review their policies for the assessment of damage as Section 3 of the Land Acquisition Act. This must include the Commissioner of State Lands, the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, the Valuation Division, and the Ministry of Food and Production. It also recommends that the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago be consulted and that consideration be given to including the Agricultural Society and the Law Association. It is further recommended that the Commissioner of Valuation ensures proper compliance with the law and land economy principles. What are the experts saying here? The experts are saying that all relevant state agencies must review their principles and practices regarding land evaluation and that they review their policies for assessing damage to property by government. And now I will read from the Highway Review Committee's conclusion. The Highway Review Committee found that there were significant shortcomings which warrant further interrogation to determine the way forward. Should the government decide to proceed with the construction of the Debe to Mon Desir segment, the Highway Review Committee is of the considered opinion that shortcomings resulting from the inadequacies of proper assessment of the likely impacts on the human and natural environment must first be determined and resolved. This brings me to the end of the recommendations and conclusions made by the experts of the Highway Review Committee. Thank you.